So you're wondering, what should I be teaching my 2-year-old and what should I be teaching my 2.5-year-old? What should they know before they turn 3 years old? You are not alone in asking this question, but I know that it can be difficult to wade through all of the information that's out there and figure out exactly what you should be working on and maybe what's not so important. Today, we're going to dive into exactly what you need to know, broken down in an easy to understand way. Hi, I'm Tori. Welcome back to my channel. I have my master's in educational psychology and I am mom to a busy little toddler. So I understand the questions that you're having, wondering if they're learning the right things, if they're developing at the right pace, and feeling maybe a little bit of mom guilt that your baby isn't doing the same thing that the baby over across the street is doing or the toddler at the park is doing. I totally get that. But I'm here to tell you, you probably don't need to be concerned. If you are working with your child on a daily basis, just develop skills and to grow the skills that they already have, you're likely on the right track. But I would love to give you some more peace of mind. And talking about development and milestones is really my bread and butter. I went to school for it, I studied it for quite a while, and I've worked on it with my own son. So today we're going to dive in what milestones your 2-year-old should be hitting around that 2-year mark, and then what they should be hitting later on before they turn 3. Okay, so it's easiest to understand development if we break it down into categories because there's so many skills and things that your toddler is learning and working on as they grow. So the major categories that we break development out into is physical development, cognitive development, which is their brain, and their social emotional development, which is their relationship with others. All of these areas are of equal importance, but they all have different skills and tasks that fall into them. And it's very possible for your child to excel in one area and to really struggle in another. That's not uncommon, but they all are areas that we need to focus on. Okay, so let's start with the social and emotional milestones that your child should be hitting around 2 years old up through 2.5. And if they're continuing to develop these skills at 3, that's okay. So they should be starting to follow simple instructions and simple routines that are a part of their daily rhythms. So most often this means they follow 1 or 2 part instructions. A 1 part instruction would be go sit on your bed. A 2 part instruction would be pick up that toy and go sit on your bed. There's a big leap that has to happen cognitively for them to get into that second, those 2 part instructions, but it's something that they're continuing to work on in social settings and something that you should be continuing to challenge them to do. They are big at this age into saying, look what I can do. They want you to watch. They want you to watch them do these new skills and these new things that they've learned. They are interacting with others in that way. That's important. At this age, children are still most often engaging in parallel play. And what parallel play is simply means that they don't often play with other kids with toys. So like they're not often sitting down with dolls and like my doll is talking to your doll. That's not parallel play. Parallel play would be one toddler is sitting here playing with a doll and another toddler is sitting here playing with a doll. And they're playing the same thing. It's parallel. They look the same, but they're not playing together. This is developmentally typical around the age of 2. Learning to interact socially and play together is something that comes a little bit later on. They're also beginning to notice at this age when other kids or even you are upset and hurting. They may be pausing and looking at a sad expression and wondering about it. They may even make a sad expression themselves. This is great. This is the beginnings of empathy, and it's something that's great to see in 2-year-olds, that you want to not encourage them to be sad, but encourage them to recognize sadness in others and provide comfort. They're also likely looking to you to how to react in new situations. Babies kind of just cry, right? About whatever is happening around them. Toddlers are beginning to look to you or to other adults or children around them to see if they need to react in a situation. So I'm sure you've encountered this as a parent, that maybe your toddler trips over their own feet and falls down, and you think, oh, don't make a face, they'll be fine, because usually they are. And you don't react, so they don't react. This is an example of that. They're learning to look to others to see whether or not their reaction, what it is, and how they should mimic it. Okay, moving on to cognitive skills. I've kind of broken this section out into cognitive and language, because language is really starting to take off at this point. And there's a lot of language milestones that, while they're included in the cognitive category, it's a little easier to grasp them all if they're broken out. So let's start with some cognitive non-language things that your 2-year-old should be doing. So they should be starting to play pretend. They understand how to play with toys in a way that they're just pretending. So they pretend to feed the baby doll the bottle, and they might even act like some toys that aren't actually representative of what they are that object. So by that I mean they might pretend that a block is a hamburger, or they might pretend that a cylinder is a baby bottle. They're beginning to understand that what pretend is, and the objects can represent other objects that they're not actually. They're also beginning to show simple problem-solving skills. So this can be as simple as, I know that my pizza is stuck inside the oven in the play kitchen, so I'm going to open the oven door to get my pizza out. That's a problem-solving skill. Or they're pushing things out of their way when they're trying to get to something behind them. Those are simple problem-solving skills that are beginning to develop. They're also starting to learn their colors. So at this point, they may be saying them to you. You may be able to understand what color they're saying, or they may show this skill in you being able to say a color, like, where's the purple circle? And they're able to accurately point to the purple circle time and time again. By 2, they should know at least one color, and that should be a skill that's forming rapidly. Once they pick up one, they really start to pick up lots of different colors. They're also working on what switches do, what knobs do, and what buttons do. Part of this is fine motor skills, that they're able to manipulate their fingers a little better to manipulate these small things. But when we're talking about it as a cognitive skill, they're learning cause and effect. They're learning that when I do something to this small object, something else happens. When I flip the light switch, the light turns on. When I push the button, the toy makes noise. That's the cognitive that we're looking for. That cause and effect they really understand it now. And finally, in the cognitive checklist, they are starting to play with more than one toy at a time. So your toddler, like mine, might like to walk around with an armful of toys so that his friends can't play with them, which is not great, but it is showing this cognitive skill that they want to play with more than one toy at a time, whereas usually a baby's focus is on the one thing that's in their hands. So you might also see this in a bit more socially acceptable way when, like, they have a play hamburger and they put it on a plate and they're walking around with the hamburger on a plate. That's 2 different toys. Or they're loading up their dump truck with dinosaurs and pushing it around the room. They're playing with more than one toy. And so that's good cognitive skill that we see, that they're beginning to put things together and understand they can play with more than one thing at once. Okay, so then moving on to language. This is huge at 2. I'm sure you have likely noticed that your 2-year-old is really starting to get some clearer words, and that you understand a lot of what they seem to be babbling about. We talk often at this stage about words that are understandable by the primary caregiver and ones that are understood by strangers, because there's a big difference in toddlerhood about how many words can be easily understood by strangers and how many words are easily understood by a toddler's primary caregiver. Those numbers are very different, and that's very developmentally typical. So around the age of 2, they should be saying around 50 words that their primary caregiver can understand on a regular basis. So it's not like just one time you're kind of guessing and like, oh, you think you said window, but it's consistently they're relating that word to a particular object and using the same sounds to represent it. So that doesn't mean that they need to say the word clearly. They may say koi instead of toy, but you know that it always means toy when they say koi. So that counts as a word. And you know what they mean, they know what they mean, and it's a word that represents an object, even if all the sounds in it are not pronounced correctly. That's how we count words at 2. So they're also beginning to understand that objects have names, and they can name more and more things. Like in a book or outside around the room, they are remembering the names of things and being able to say those words and can tell you what those things are when you ask them. Their speech is getting clearer. It's something you should notice just about as every month passes, that there's more and more words that you can clearly understand and that strangers or people that are typically not around your child can understand. They can also point out things when you ask where they are. So if we're reading the Good Night book and you can say, where's the bear? They can point to the bear. Even if they can't say bear yet, they're beginning to even understand the words that you say relate to objects, even if they cannot make the sounds for them. About the age of 2, they should be putting 2 words together in a sentence. Now, it doesn't always have to be grammatically correct. That's not an expectation at this stage. It's just that they're putting 2 words together. So it might be more milk, or it might be a noun and a verb, an action word. So it might be kitty jump, or it might be grandma's house. It could be any 2 words that go together. Sometimes they don't always make sense how we would say them, but you know that what they're trying to communicate, and they're putting those 2 words together to get their point across better. That's a huge skill at this point. You may notice with this age that all of a sudden, overnight, they seem to learn a ton of words. Like maybe you were discouraged before, thinking, oh gosh, he only knows 20 and the neighbor kid knows 75 who's the same age, and you just don't know what you're doing wrong. But toddlers go through this amazing thing called fast mapping, and it's a developmental milestone that they hit, something that happens cognitively in their brain between the ages of 2 and 3, where it really seems to like click overnight that they are just able to learn words like this and retain them. And it's not something that you can bring on by anything that you do. There's no activity that can make fast mapping happen. It's just something that comes with time, and when the toddler's brain is ready, it happens. And you will likely think overnight, holy cow, how did he learn all of these words? Or each day you may find yourself telling your partner, oh, guess what he said today? He said this new word. So if you're feeling worried about how many words your toddler knows, hang tight. You might just be waiting for that click to happen in their brain, for that fast mapping to happen, and they will know so many words before the phase is over. Okay, and then just a couple more in the language area. They're beginning to learn their body parts. This is a great thing to work on. They should point and know at least 2, so that might be head and stomach, hands and feet, legs and arms, and they're able to say them and point to them when asked. And they're beginning to know a lot more gestures beyond just waving and pointing. So they might be learning how to blow kisses or nod their head yes or shake their head no, to say shh. There's a lot of different gestures that they could be learning, but they should be picking up quite a few at this point. Okay, and then the last area of development is physical development and the movements that they are capable of. So In this category, there are two major sections, which is gross motor skills, which is the motor skills of the big muscles of the body, like your legs and your arms, and then fine motor skills, which are the motor skills of the small muscles, namely the hands. So there are things that you should be looking for with both of these because, again, some kids can struggle really with fine motor skills but excel in gross motor skills or vice versa. So we should be looking for both when we're evaluating how they're really doing in a physical development checklist. So for fine motor skills, they're beginning to be able to twist and turn things with their hands. They should be able to pick up smaller and smaller objects, have really mastered the pincher grasp. At this point, picking up small things, they're beginning to figure out how to unzip their coat or to take off their shoes to undo the Velcro. They should be turning book pages is a great thing to have them practice if you're doing like a nightly story time. That's a great fine motor skill that they need to be working on, getting the page up and holding on to it and turning it. They should be really getting good at using silverware, being able to manipulate it to get the food on their fork or scoop things up with their spoon. They should be showing some interest in early writing skills, which really just means scribbling, that they're able to hold a crayon or a marker or a pencil and scribble on a piece of paper. And they should be able to build towers with blocks at this point. They should be able to hold blocks steady enough that they can build towers that are 3 to 4 blocks high, depending on what kind of blocks you're using. Of course, some are easier than others. And to understand balance enough and to have enough control of their hands that they're able to get them on there the right way. And as they grow, they will be able to build taller and taller towers, which is just great. So then in the gross motor skills, some of the things they should be able to do by the time they're about 2.5 is jumping off the ground with both feet. It might not be a very efficient jump. They might not be getting very high or very far, but they are able to jump and get both feet off the ground. They're able to throw a ball. Again, doesn't have to be accurately. My son sure just wings them, but they're able to throw a ball. They've figured out that motion and they're able to manipulate their muscles in that way. They should also be able to kick a ball, so standing on one foot. Kicking with the other is an important skill that they should be working on. They're beginning to run instead of just walk, and you'll see the speed increase as they get a little older. Maybe your child has already mastered this, but picking up the speed is something they should be working on. They should be able to walk up the stairs by the time they're about 2.5. So not on all fours, but just on their 2 legs. And this may still mean that they're holding on to a railing depending on, the steepness of the stairs or whatever. But that they're not on all fours to go up the stairs. They may have a preference for one hand or the other, one foot or the other at this point. You might start to see a right-handed or left-handed preference. They're also able to carry multiple toys while walking. So this was difficult before because of balance when they were just learning to walk, to be able to hold something and walk at the same time, but they're really mastering the walking skill, so they're able to walk and hold large toys or several toys at the same time while walking, something that's really important. Okay, so then I just want to throw in a few things that you should be seeing by the time that they're 3. So these are still things that your 2-year-old should be learning, but you likely won't see until you're in the second half of that second year, closer to the 3-year mark. So in the language and communication area, they will be having more and more conversations with you. So you're able to ask them a question, they give you an answer, and they might even ask a question back. They're beginning to ask questions like why, what, where, how, about the world around them. You can see that they're really processing what's happening around them and they want to know more about it. And they're able to articulate that through their words and ask you good questions. By the time they're 3, the gap should really be closing on how many words that a stranger can understand and you can understand. That gap is wide when they're 2. It should be very much narrowed by the time they're 3. It might not be totally gone. There might still be some things that your 3-year-old says that only you understand, but it should definitely be far more words that strangers can understand and you can understand as well. There's a lot more objects that they should be able to name. They should also be able to name actions a little bit better, like running and jumping and climbing. They have the words, the verbs for those sorts of things. They should also know their name at this point. They might just know their first name, or they might know their whole name and the names of those around them, that they can say them, and when they're asked, they can tell you their name. A couple other cognitive things that they should be doing is beginning to recognize different shapes. Part of the fine motor skills that they should have in tandem with cognitive skills is beginning to draw those shapes, very simple ones like circles or squares. They're probably a bit abstract, but they're understanding the concept of shapes, being able to name them, being able to draw them. And they're also beginning to understand the dangers about the world around them by the time they're 3. They're beginning to remember that the stove is hot when it's cooking and we don't touch it. The oven is hot, that it's too big of a jump for me to make. I don't want to pinch my fingers in the door. They're beginning to remember those things and taking steps to keep themselves safer, which is great for you as a parent. I know that toddlerhood is a scary time of telling them to get down, to not jump that high, to not stick their finger in the socket. So this is a great one, I personally feel. And then a few things in the movement, physical development. They're beginning to dress themselves, putting on clothes instead of just taking off. That's something that has developed. It's more difficult to put clothes on, but they're beginning to be able to do that and want to do that. They have a little bit better fine motor control when they're coloring. They are able to string beads onto a string. That's a great fine motor skill to work on. You may be starting with like scissors. That's a great fine motor skill to be working on. And those are just a few things that by 3, towards the end of 2, you can be working on if your toddler has mastered all the things from before. Okay, so I just want to give you a few tips if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by all of these things that your toddler should be learning. Maybe they're a little bit behind, they're not quite doing all these things yet, or it just seems like a lot of things to be teaching them. I want you to take a deep breath with me. It's okay. I know that it can seem overwhelming and it can be difficult to process if your child is behind and not meeting the milestones that they should. But there are some simple things that you can do to help them develop those skills, and there are lots and lots of places that you can reach out to for help if that's something that you need. So one of my first tips is just to provide opportunities for them to learn these skills. So by this, I simply mean provide them with blocks, provide them with different colored things. They can't learn to build a tower if they never have blocks. They can't learn to string beads if they never have a string and beads. So it may not be so much that you need to push learning of the skill as much as you need to give them the opportunity to try and the opportunity to practice. A lot of these things just come with practice and repeated exposure, and your child feeling safe to learn in their environment. So make sure that there is structure in their day. There's not too much craziness going on, noise and loud things when they're trying to do these learning activities, so that they feel safe and comfortable enough to work hard at what they're doing and learn from it. The other thing, if you're struggling with language development or cognitive development, is that you should talk and read and sing to your child often. We often underestimate the power of books and the power of songs in teaching language to our children. It's probably the primary mode that your child will learn the language of those around them. And you should find yourself just talking to talk around your toddler if you're really wanting to work on language skills. You might feel a little crazy. You might feel like you're talking to the air, but narrating about the world around you, narrating what your toddler is doing, narrating what you're doing will give your toddler so much exposure to words and the objects that those words relate to in a way that they really will soak up. Without you having to do a bunch of extra work. We're not like talking about flashcards or anything at this point. We're just talking about speaking extra and going about your daily life and letting them soak up, because toddlers really do soak up what is around them. And my third tip would be to offer social interaction whenever possible. Some parents choose to put their children in daycare and some are able to stay home. Some choose to stay home. Whatever that looks like for you or your family, it's still important that they're getting interaction with peers their own age, with older kids, with younger kids, so that they can practice the social skills. It's kind of just like the blocks. If they don't have a chance to practice it, they don't have the opportunity to learn those skills. So sometimes all they need is the opportunity and the space and the time to learn those social skills. And if you still feel concerned, you feel like you've given your child opportunities, they're just not keeping pace, they're just not learning, they're just not growing, it might be time to reach out for professional help. Your pediatrician likely has some great recommendations for local professionals that can help your child and help you evaluate where your child is at and give you strategies and goals to reach that are attainable for your child and can really help them get to a place that you're all comfortable with their development. You can ask for like a speech pathologist, you might ask for an occupational therapist, you might ask for a physical therapist, just depending on what area that your child is struggling in. But your pediatrician is a great place to start. If your toddler is in preschool yet, their preschool teacher might also be a great person to ask about what they think about their development and for recommendations for professionals in your area. Okay, that was a lot of information, but I hope you don't feel overwhelmed. It's important to remember that all of these skills can be developed through day-to-day activities and through play, which is where toddlers learn best. So get out there, enjoy some playtime with your toddler, maybe be intentional about the toys and the activities that you're having them do, but then just let go of all the milestones they may need to hit today. Have a little bit of fun, and I hope that this video has been helpful to you. If you're looking for some great activities to do with your toddler that don't require a ton of setup and are helping them learn all these skills that they need to develop, you can find my activity guide down in the description below. It has some great activities that I use with my son myself and are based in learning strategies. They will help your child learn the skills that they need to, and they won't take a lot of work from you. The guide is free. They're super easy to set up, so feel free to check that out. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.